Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I know firsthand how unsure and uncertain it can be to be an entrepreneur, because not only are we charting unpaved courses, but nobody else has ever done these exact courses unless you're surrounded by a collection of peers and people who are at least 1 or 10 or more steps ahead of you to help guide you. And that's why I love today's guest's business, because this is a guest and fellow entrepreneur who really believes in one of our founding philosophies of a rising tide lifts all boats. Let me introduce you to him. His name is Geoffrey Boyce. Geoffrey is the founder and CEO of ForFounder, which is a private membership community helping founders navigate capital and company transitions with the support of trusted peers. A seasoned entrepreneurial executive, Geoffrey brings more than 2 decades of experience building and scaling mission-driven organizations, from startup all the way to national reach. Before founding ForFounder, Geoffrey was a pioneer in telehealth and virtual behavioral health, helping drive an entire industry from early adoption to mainstream acceptance. His leadership expertise spans organizational design, capital strategy, mergers and acquisitions, and operational scale across multi-state systems. Known for his ability to turn strategy into execution, which is what we all need, Geoffrey has built high-performing virtual workforces and cultures rooted in accountability, innovation, and shared mission. I am so excited because Geoffrey's going to be a wealth of knowledge, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Geoffrey Boyce. All right, Geoffrey, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Ryan.
Heck yes, so excited to tap into the wealth of all of the amazing things that you have done up to this point in your career. So let's start with you personally. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Geoffrey? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Well, I appreciate that you think that they're cool things, but I'm Geoffrey. I'm really just sort of a jack of all trades, kind of a generalist business person. I've always been pretty good at being pretty good at a number of different things. And, I carried that mentality with me into the business world, right? So I, have a wood shop in the back. I love kind of DIY projects and tinkering with things. I love having my hands in things. And so as I've been working with different companies, built several companies along the way, it's been really fun to sort of have my hands directly in it, to be a creator, and to sort of understand how all the different pieces and parts work together. I'm sort of a generalist entrepreneur overall.
Yeah, I love that, Geoffrey, especially because my big argument here in 2026, you and I are obviously having this conversation during Q1, is that this is the era of the generalist, because as long as you know enough to be dangerous in a lot of different areas, AI, for example, can plug in so many of those gaps. And obviously the global talent pool, historically, we've been limited to the talent pool that's immediately around us geographically, but now there's this worldwide pool of technology, of human capital, of so much that we can pull from. Geoffrey, you clearly, I love the fact that you led with that. You clearly see the benefits of being a generalist. Talk to us about that.
Well, yeah, it's just always been kind of natural to me. I would say that I felt lucky in that sort of throughout my whole life, I've been able to sort of see both the forest and the trees at the same time. I can see how all of the small pieces fit together into the bigger picture, into the bigger vision. And I would say as a leader, I've been pretty lucky to be able to help people see how their specific piece ties into that vision and how it all builds to something great. I think that it's just been relatively natural to me, and I feel lucky for that. But I also agree with you that now is probably the time for us generalists to shine, right? Because we have so many tools and so many resources available to us where we can tap into very specific expertise and align it towards something that hopefully is important and exciting.
Yeah, Geoffrey, I'm going to use that, of course, as a natural segue into all the cool things that you're up to with ForFounder, because when you talk about helping people see the path and getting clarity on that, I love the seeing the forest through the trees cliche and quote that we all have out there. But Geoffrey, when I think about that, I think about how frequently it's unknown, it's uncharted territory, I think is the best way that I can phrase it, of being an entrepreneur, being a founder, taking on outside capital, navigating all of those inflection points within our business paths. And not only can it feel lonely, but it can also feel very confusing. And let's face it, there's pros and cons of every single decision we make as founders. So introduce us to ForFounder. Why ForFounder? Why now? I'd love to hear that backstory.
Yeah, Brian, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Like it's actually really why I'm excited to be on the show with you today, because it seems like we share a lot of similar passions, right? And this fundamental belief that founders are out there doing something special and important, and that they're bringing necessary innovation into the world, right? ForFounder is rooted in that belief, and I think your organization is as well, right? And so I think we're really aligned on some of these high level things. And when we think about what a founder has to do, right, all the different hats that a founder has to wear, it's pretty ridiculous, right? All the different roles you have to play, the grit and the dedication that you have to have, and you end up becoming an absolute expert in your business, and probably an absolute expert in your space, right? And that's essential to be able to bring to light the vision that you have. But there are parts in that journey where I think you're going to be asked to do things that are probably far outside of your comfort zone, far outside of any sort of experience or training that you might have had before. And those are points where it is really particularly helpful to surround yourself with other people who have been there, done that, and can look at some of these challenges in a similar light as you do as a founder, right? And within ForFounder, we think that one of the most critical stages that companies often go through, where they really need help from other folks who have been there, done that, is their first interaction with institutional capital, right? And these could be venture capitalists, could be private equity, could be a strategic that is interested in investing in you, or potentially even angels. But our experience has been that there are a lot of founders that find themselves in a position of needing more capital in their business, whether that is to fund growth because they want to do some M&A activity, or potentially because they're looking to exit. You find a number of founders that are out there that, again, are experts in their company, experts in their space, but they just don't have any experience navigating these very complex institutional capital transactions. And so ForFounder was built to help companies as they are going through that, right? It is a community of founders who have been there and done that, have learned a lot of hard-fought lessons along the way, who are motivated by this idea of, hey, how do I share? How do I pay it forward? And they come together in our private community and make those lessons available to the folks that are either preparing to go through it or in the middle of it themselves.
Geoffrey, I really appreciate 100% all those words that you said about alignment. 100%. That's why as soon as our pre-production team came across ForFounder, we had to reach out and invite you to come on the show, because we believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. And hearing the words that you're saying about people who are 1 or 2 or 10 steps ahead of it, I can imagine, because part of my role of podcast host is I always think about, what is the listener thinking? What might they want me to ask you in this moment? I know that a lot of them might be thinking, well, why are these people inside of ForFounder? Why in general are people just so willing to give back and share their trade secrets? And Geoffrey, I'm 17 years into my entrepreneurial journey, and that's long enough to realize that there are no trade secrets. There's literally no secret. There's just our ability to share with other people. That said, from a business perspective, you not only started this business, you not only have attracted the right type of people into ForFounder, but you've helped to create and cultivate this environment where this giving, this transparency, this generosity is the culture. What has that looked like? Because I'm sure you've given a lot of thought.
I appreciate that. And maybe you're giving me more credit than I deserve. You're certainly giving me more credit than I deserve. I think that this passion for helping others and this idea of paying it forward has always existed within this community of founders. I think we're just trying to give it more of a platform and a different mechanism for doing that, right? You're doing similar things with this very podcast, obviously. But I am regularly surprised by the number of experienced founders who I interact with who tell me, heck yeah, I would love to share. I would love to have an opportunity to pay this forward, right? Because I have benefited from the wisdom of others throughout my career. I've had great mentors. I've had great leaders. I've learned a lot from other people. And now is my time to sort of give it back. And so I don't want to say that ForFounder is built just on this idea of altruism, right? Because I think there is something that can come for the giver of this information in this whole equation, right? But this sense of wanting to pay it forward, to pass on those hard-fought lessons so that somebody else doesn't have to make some of the same boneheaded mistakes that many of us have already made. It's really out there. And all ForFounder is doing is tapping into it. And we're trying to make it easy for the folks that have been there and done that to capture those lessons, to record them within our database, and then to make them accessible to the next group that would really benefit from them.
Yeah, so well said. I really appreciate that attitude. And I want to flip to the other side of the table now, because I started my first business when I was 19 years old. And I remember when I was 19, gosh, I was asking some silly questions of founders who were so far ahead of me that were brilliant and were super willing to help me. However, I didn't know how to extract their zone of genius as well as I should have. And I think about how frequently in today's AI conversation, we talk about the quality of your outputs is only ever going to be as the quality of your inputs. And so when I was 19, Geoffrey, I was asking people such vague questions as, how do I get sponsors for my blog? Like that's all I knew how to ask, instead of saying, hey, when you're talking to a potential sponsor, what is it that they're looking for? What's the value add for them? How can I position myself properly? And so that was a learning curve for me as I matured, not only in age, but in years of experience in entrepreneurship. Geoffrey, what does it look like on the inside of ForFounders for people who want to say, how do I make the most of these brilliant entrepreneurs who are multiple steps ahead of me? How do you facilitate asking the right questions, leaning on the right advice, having the right inputs in order to get the right outputs?
Yeah. So ForFounder is really built on three pillars, right? And it's not rocket science. Our three pillars are that we want to create easy mechanisms for folks to share. We want to create easy mechanisms for folks to seek. And we want to create easy mechanisms for them to connect with one another. So share, seek, and connect are at the very core of what ForFounder is doing. Obviously, your question relates to the seek functionality within the system, but that only can exist when we have created easy mechanisms for others to share their wisdom with us, right? And I like that your comments are also tapping into, the hot topic of the age and AI, right? And so what we have built here is an AI-enabled platform that allows users to run queries, asynchronously in natural language, anything that might be on their mind. It could be a dumb question, could be kind of boneheaded, but they can ask it into our tool. Our tool is going to tap into a database of the founder wisdom that has been deposited so far, and it's going to generate an answer that only represents the wisdom of our community, right? So we are, tapping into some of the same technologies that folks are using in their everyday use of AI, but we have set it up where it lives and only runs on this private database that represents the wisdom of founders within our community. It's firewalled off from the larger internet, so we're able to filter out some of the kind of noise and bias that probably exists when you're just searching broadly for these types of questions, and you can actually tap into the wisdom of folks who are your peers by virtue of being members of the same community.
Geoffrey, I love that, because in today's day and age, everybody wants to start a tech company. Everybody is starting SaaS companies. You have built this membership community, which is so human-oriented. It's the most human-oriented. Community is probably the oldest thing dating back to the beginning of time. Yet you're also leveraging the most current technology. And so I'm super curious from your perspective, because I've always been fascinated by that quote of, we're always building two businesses simultaneously, the business that we have today and the business that that we're going to have 5 years from now. It seems to me like you are building a community business in tandem with part tech business to help people access those resources and that wisdom. What does that look like when you sit down in your executive time and you flesh it all out in your mind? How much focus is it to the community aspect and the human aspect? How are you viewing that technological component? I think it's a brilliant marriage between the two.
Yeah, it's actually been a challenge that my co-founder Olivia and I have faced. It's how much time do we really want to devote to the technology platform here versus how much time and energy do we want to devote to the member experience and the community element. And honestly, we're sort of landing on a pretty equal balance of those two things. I think we fundamentally believe that our members, again, are special, that they deserve a lot of respect. They deserve some hand-holding and relationship management and support in how they can both contribute as much as possible to the community and how the community can in turn give back to them. And so we have really, I think, found sort of an equal balance where we're building out this technology platform that's going to make it easier. It's going to scale, obviously. I think it's going to have some unique kind of business characteristics that are favorable for us in the long term here. But at its core, it is the interpersonal relationships that are really going to make this happen. And so we want to make sure that we know every single one of our members. We know sort of the background and the experience and the perspective that they're bringing into the community. We also identify, well, what are some of the challenges or needs that you might have as an individual or for the business that you're running, and how can we help you get the support and wisdom that you may need to navigate that? And so while the technology is a huge part of this, the human relationships are, absolutely essential.
And Geoffrey, I want to go deeper there because I do not want to gloss over this. I think that this is a massive part of your value add that I hope that people see is that curation. I think that we're also in this incredible era where curation is a massive value add in any and every single one of our businesses. It's something that we take a lot of pride in behind the scenes here at this show, is that we are handpicking. A lot of people know that we proactively reach out to guests who we firmly believe will be a value add on the airwaves, and that's why we curate every single person who's on the air. They've gone through deep vetting, and I know that the same is true for what you're doing with ForFounder, is that it is, as of you and I talking, it is invite only. It is a private community. Talk to us about that curation, what that looks like, what the criteria is that you're looking for, how you then go after these people that you think are huge value adds inside the community. I'd love for you to take us behind the scenes there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a curated experience is core to the strategy here. And a big thing is we want to make sure that our members really feel like they are among their peers, right? It is important that this is a private walled garden where folks know that every single member of the community has gone through the same vetting and admission process, that we have validated that they are who they say they are, that they have the experience that they say that they have, and that they have something both to give and to get from the community. So we've got pretty firm admission criteria on the front door. We have a strong gatekeeper function to make sure that only our members are allowed in or are interacting with one another. And then, as you say, we take time to get to know them, to understand how can they benefit from this community, right? And in the early days of their onboarding and journey with us, we very proactively reach out to them and connect them with other members who may be able to help them. We help them learn how to use the tool best to get answers to their queries. We try to curate their experience. We see different profiles of members that all meet our criteria, but that are coming in with very different problems to solve or very different wisdom to offer. We customize the early days of their membership with us to make sure that they realize and feel value right from the outset. And so while it is absolutely a invitation membership community, we also rely heavily on referrals from our existing members to grow. And so we want to make sure that every one of our members that comes in experiences delight within the first 30 days of their membership with us. And at that point, we want to ask them, hey, who within your network, who amongst your peers do you think would also benefit from this? And can you help make that connection to us so that we can keep growing this community, because it absolutely gets better as more and more great quality people join.
Yes, I love that. And the more that I think about the amazing conversations that must be happening inside of ForFounder, which, remember, I really view those conversations as the ones that happen outside of ForFounder as well, because I'm sure those connections take on a life of their own outside of your platform. And when I think about that, I think about all the magic that arises when entrepreneurs get together. Is that I'm sure a lot of what you all focus on is those capital transitions and capital decisions that come with all of that. However, I interview entrepreneurs for a living. I know that frequently when you bring entrepreneurs together, they end up sharing other similar shared life experiences, life dilemmas, talking about health insurance, talking about where to work from, talking about how lonely it can all be. Take us behind the scenes into some of those conversations, because I love the phrase right in your bio of inflection points. Geoffrey, there's so many inflection points that we all experience, and they're not always what we expect them to be. What are some of these pain points and inflection points that people end up connecting over?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I, like you, really value being amongst peers and being a part of those conversations. I've been a member of a Vistage peer group, a CEO peer group, for about the last 5 years. And every month I look forward to getting in that room with about a dozen of my peers who sit in a similar seat as me. They run a business. They're the CEO, oftentimes the founder of that company. And we support one another in all sorts of different ways, right? Certainly there's always a focus on what's happening within our business, and how can we get some outside perspective to maybe help us look at a problem a different way, or guide us on how we might want to approach something. But we often find that we're talking about far more than just our businesses, right? We're talking about our lives, our goals, our overall health and wellness, sharing book recommendations, podcast recommendations, right? We're making one another smarter just by virtue of, sort of being in that community with one another. And that kind of peer group mentality is something that we are replicating within ForFounder, but we are finding that there's a gap in the way a lot of these peer communities work, right? A lot of times, a Vistage or a YPO or an EO, they are intentionally designed to sort of support a founder or a business owner throughout a broad range of situations, right? And that can be very, very helpful for many of the reasons that I know you and I understand. But we at ForFounder find that there is often a gap in the support that those types of peer organizations can provide, because sometimes you're doing a really complicated thing, right? And the example of going through an institutional capital raise, where you're going out and you're negotiating and pitching to very sophisticated investors who have a playbook, who do these types of deals every single day, you may be hard pressed to find the type of experience and expertise from your local peer group that you need in order to navigate that successfully. And so within ForFounder, we're sort of saying, hey, those peer groups have their place. They're awesome. They're amazing. But when you need some extra help around this particular part of your business, raising institutional capital, this is a group for you, right? And so while we have that kind of laser focus now on that stage of business when you're considering institutional capital for growth or exit, I think in the future we could see our community and our model evolving into other types of support services. But for the time being, we're staying pretty laser focused on helping one another navigate institutional capital.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, especially because I feel like we're in these funky times right now where people aren't sure, even on a macro level, what navigating the world of capital looks like, what navigating the current economic climate. I'll even broaden it to just that. And Geoffrey, I know that there's no perfect answer here, but I am super curious to hear publicly your macro thoughts about where we are as business owners. Of course, there's a lot for everybody else to shake out in the broader economic conversation. But Geoffrey, from your perspective, you see a lot of people navigating this. What's your take on where we are societally, economically, and in the business world when it comes to viewing capital as one of those strategic growth levers for our businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it just goes back to how much capital is available out there, right? I mean, private equity has just exploded in the last number of years, and everyone will tell you how much dry powder there is sitting out there on the sidelines. and they're eager to get it deployed, right? They're eager to get it into different types of businesses than it has ever sort of been contemplated within before, right? I came from a healthcare background. I know that there is a lot of presence and frankly, a lot of anxiety about what does institutional capital look like within healthcare service organizations. You see a lot of more of these blue collar types of businesses that are also getting rolled up by private equity, and that's new territory for a lot of folks. And so, I think it's here to stay, sort of regardless of what might happen within the macroeconomy. There's a ton of money that is looking to be deployed by acquiring these private businesses. And so I think there's going to be challenges for entrepreneurs, for the foreseeable future of, well, how do we do these deals properly? And I think that's what ForFounder is kind of here to help support them on.
Yeah, so well said. And I think that's really important in times like this to remind people that just because it looks in the mainstream like everything is going in one certain direction doesn't mean that that's a universal truth. And I really think about even industry-wise, Geoffrey, we see so many LinkedIn profiles and websites of founders, of businesses, of entrepreneurs, obviously as our research of who we want to invite onto the show. And we obviously see a massive uprising in AI companies and software companies. Everyone's launching a SaaS these days, which is incredible to me because my sister is a veterinarian, for example, and I see how much private equity cash is going towards veterinarian clinics, and rightfully so. And we've had people in the trades businesses here on this show talking about capital within their industry. So I've always loved that concept of when everybody else is zigging, you should be the one zagging. What's your take on that? Because I'm sure a lot of people are also wondering, is it all tech companies inside of ForFounder? Obviously, you guys cross that entire industry or spectrum of industries. What's that look like in practicality?
Yeah, I mean, we started with a version of this that was industry specific, right? The original theory was, well, you got to sort of put together this density of expertise and information by industry because in many instances, the investors operate within a handful of industries, right? And so we originally started building the business with that in mind, that we were going to build sort of distinct industry-based communities, again, with this focus on how do we help them navigate institutional capital. But the more we got into it, the more we realized, hey, there are so many universal truths in all of this that are totally industry agnostic. We're going to unnecessarily limit ourselves. We're going to limit the power of the community by bringing sort of cross-functional people together. And so we evolved the idea and ended up landing in this place that we feel really good about, which is that, hey, so long as a business and entrepreneur meets our minimum profile and our standards for admission, we don't care what industry they're coming from because we believe that there are a lot of lessons to be shared. Probably the most common one is this idea of preparation, right? I think people sometimes put off this idea that they need to do a deal until as long as possible, until as late in the game as possible. And they assume that they can put some kind of deal together in 3 months or 6 months, right? And for anyone who has been through it, they know that those timelines are entirely unrealistic, right? And what you need to do is need to get yourself prepared way earlier than you think you need to be prepared, and you need to stay transaction ready. You need to operate your business from a point of transaction readiness, and those are some of the lessons that our founders are sharing with us. We're sharing with our community, and that type of fundamental business knowledge. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, right? It's applicable to everyone.
Yeah, so well said. Geoffrey, I'm starting to realize you have one of the same superpowers that I have, is that you and I get to talk to brilliant founders every single day of our lives, and we get to steal some of those good ideas, and it gives us a fresh perspective on so many things. And it also means that you and I see across traditional boundaries, across industry boundaries, and that's something that I really want to call out. I've loved seeing this rise in when we talk about niching down. Historically, it meant niching down merely from industry. When I started my web design and SEO agency all the way back in 2012, everyone told me, pick a niche. You want to do it for telehealth clinics, is that's what you want to build websites for and what you want to do SEO for. And what we realized was, no, we want to niche down by attitude, by values, by all of those things that we share in common. And it's really cool to see how your members. I would imagine that everyone inside of ForFounder is able to borrow from other people's industries as well. So huge kudos to what you and your team have built. Geoffrey, I've got to put you on the spot one last time though, because I always ask this question. What's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing that you want to leave them with today?
It's a great question, Brian, and I appreciate you wanting to close with it. I think when I look at my own journey and I look at the experiences that I am borrowing from all these other founders, one thing just keeps ringing true to me, and that is the idea that you should not go through this alone, right? Even if you have a great skill set, you're a jack of all trades, you're a generalist, you feel like you can sort of dabble in everything. The idea of going through a large transaction with institutional capital alone is folly. And you should surround yourself with the right people who have been there and done that before. So that you can harness their wisdom, and you should make sure that you put together the right deal team who is aligned with you. And that's the internal deal team, right? The members of your company, they're going to help you support as you go through this, as well as that external deal team, right? Those advisors, that investment banker, sell-side advisor, accountant, attorney. Make sure that you surround yourself with the right people who have relevant experience, who have done these sorts of large capital transactions before. And make sure that you are tapping into the wisdom of founders, because you're going to need it to keep yourself sane as you work your way through that diligence process. It's like nothing you have ever done before. And if you try to go it alone, you are at risk of cracking for sure.
Yes, so well said. 100% true. And Geoffrey, that is why I'm so appreciative of you being one of those shining examples of showing up for others. You absolutely hit the nail on the head. That's one of our core mottos and founding principles, is that a rising tide lifts all boats. We believe that when you bring entrepreneurs together, good things happen. And I hope that a lot of people took a lot of valuable things away from our conversation today. And I'm also very excited for listeners to go see ForFounder, not just hear you and I talk about it, but actually go check it out. So for listeners who want to find all the cool stuff that you're up to, drop some links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
It's as simple as forfounder.com, FORFOUNDER.com.
Yes, and to make it even simpler, listeners, you already know the drill. We're dropping that link down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So if you're driving, if you're at the gym, if you're in the shower, wherever it is that you're tuning into us, have no fear. You can click right on through from the links in the show notes down below. So Geoffrey, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. It's been fun.